Okay, so welcome to the Alteryx Designer user interface, where we create our workflows. So to break things down to the core features, we can really split the interface into 4 distinct sections. At the top we have what is known as the tool palette, which unsurprisingly contains a list of tools that you can use when constructing your workflows. And as you can see, the tools have been bucketed into different categories depending on the functionality that each tool performs. For example, here we have the set of in-out tools that help address data sourcing and data output tasks. So you're going to be using these tools whenever you are trying to connect to data or are trying to produce an output ready for onward consumption. Next, we have the preparation tools, where you can cleanse data, for example, remove white space from your raw data, you can filter data, you can even create new columns of data that do not reside in the raw dataset, but is predicated on an underlying formula or calculation. Next, we have tools that help with joining data, we have tools that help with transforming data, and so on. Now on the surface this may not seem like many tools, but if we click on the little plus icon just to the right hand side of these tools, we are presented with so many more. For example, we have tools that help with reporting, like creating automated email distributions. We have spatial tools that help us work with spatial data, for example, working with geographic data. We even have developer tools in which we can integrate languages such as Python. Now you will obviously not use all of these tools in a single workflow. In fact, there will likely be tools you never touch as you will not have a use case for them. But for tools that you use more frequently, you can click the little star button which puts the tool into your favourites. So when it comes to locating the tool in future, you can simply come to your favourites and drag it in from there. Now as you may have noticed, the tools are colour-coded, which can help us quickly identify the different stages of the workflow at a high level. So when you see dark blue tools on the page, for example, you know that it's performing some kind of preparation-based activity. Now one of the great things about Alteryx is its in-application help options. So let's say you were stuck and you didn't know what a specific tool did. You can click on a tool and it will bring up a short description as to what the function does, which will hopefully answer your question as to whether the tool is appropriate to address your problem statement. Now if you need further help, you can always click on the Open Example button, which brings up a new page that shows how the specific tool in question can be used in a variety of examples. You can also right-click on the tool and then select Help, which will open up the formal Alteryx documentation and will then explain how the tool works in more detail. Now finally, in the top right-hand corner, you have the search feature, which has 2 main benefits. Firstly, you can search for words that may help in addressing your problem. For example, let's say we wanted to filter our data but didn't know how to go about doing this. We can search for filter data and it comes up with different help options. You can see here that it brings back tools that may address your problem. It also brings back help documentation as well as snippets from the Alteryx community that may have had problems addressed previously to help you learn and interact with the community directly from the designer application itself. A very powerful feature, and it's something that I use a lot to help address bumps in the road when creating my Alteryx workflows. The next important section of the interface is known as the canvas. Now the canvas is the area in which you will drag and drop the tools from the tool palette to create your workflows. So let's create a very simple example. So firstly, we will drag an input tool onto the canvas by locating it in our tool palette and then dragging and dropping it onto the canvas. Now each tool will have different elements that you can configure, and it's in the configuration window on the left hand side where you can tailor the configuration settings to meet your needs. You can also use the configuration window to annotate your tools so that you can create a very clean audit trail that enables any user or observer of your workflow to easily understand what each stage of the workflow is doing. Now, depending on the tool you are using will depend on the configuration options available to you. So seeing as we've dragged in an input tool, we are being asked to provide it a file or connect a file or database. So what I can do is then search for this file, and in this example I will connect to an Excel file that showcases some Spotify statistics. Now, throughout the course, we'll be exploring so many tools independently and how we can run them in conjunction with each other to create some really nice dynamic workflows that can help in automating solutions. So once we've selected our dataset, we are given more options in the configuration window. For example, we can choose where the data starts from, i.e. what row. We can also see a snippet of what our data looks like, showing the rows and columns of information. Now, to create a workflow, we need to join tools together, and you will notice that tools have either an output anchor, an input anchor, or both. Now, linking tools creates a sequence of operations. So let's now suppose we didn't need to see all of the fields in the dataset, and we only wanted to see a few of them. We can use a preparation tool known as select, which will allow us to select columns from the data source. Now, if you drag a tool close enough to a previous tool, Alteryx will establish a connection link for you without you having to manually create the connection. But if the connection has not been established after dragging onto the canvas, you can connect tools by clicking the output anchor of one tool like so and dragging it across to the input anchor of another. Now, for the purposes of this example, I'm simply going to select 5 columns of data that I find interesting from the raw dataset. Now finally, to browse the result of our workflow at this stage, we can use a browse tool. Now we can drag and drop as previously seen, or we can actually right click on the previous tool and then select Add Browse After. We can also search for a tool and drag and drop from the search results directly onto the canvas. If you create a connection that you no longer want to establish, simply right click on the connection line and select Delete Connection. Now when we want to run our workflow, we can select the blue Run button in the top right corner, or alternatively we can press Ctrl+R, which will also run the workflow. Once the workflow has finished running, you will be able to observe the output, which brings us to the final section of the interface known as the results window. Now the results window gives you information about the workflow status, as well as the ability to see the results of your workflow at different stages. Now, keeping an eye on your data and data structure throughout the workflow will help ensure that the workflow is producing results in line with your expectation. So in summary, the tool palette contains a list of tools that you can use in your workflows. When you've identified a tool that you want to use, you can drag it onto the canvas. Linking tools together establishes a chain of operations that will be actioned in sequence on your data. The configuration window is where you can establish the necessary settings for each of your tools, with each tool potentially having different configuration parameters that need to be populated. Finally, you have the results window where you can see the results of your workflow. Now with this in mind, let's start exploring the different tools and their respective configuration settings and showcase how it transforms data to help address various problem statements.